Our planet generates an incredible amount of extraordinary phenomenon. Some we take for granted, even if they are a little difficult to predict. Others occur to us as nothing short of miraculous. Often, these are events in places seldom seen by people. They are rare, mysterious, and many seem outright impossible. This series encapsulates the remarkable with the exceptional. Is seeing really believing? With the help of leading scientists, fact will be separated from fiction. Join us as we unravel the newly discovered science behind Northern Ireland's mysterious Giant's Causeway. Discover the obscure Los Angeles tar pits and walk between two tectonic plates in Iceland. It is a journey taken with eyes wide open. Welcome to Impossible Planet. On the coast of Northern Ireland, pillars of stone thrust up from the earth in shapes so perfect they seem impossible. This is the Giant's Causeway.
Whenever you were younger, you were told they were formed by a massive giant who put all these rocks together. But whenever you find out the real story, I think personally that is one of the most exciting parts of Northern Ireland's geology.
It's a series of almost otherworldly rocks. Rocks that are arranged in an extraordinarily regular manner, so much so that you can't imagine that they have not actually been chiseled out by somebody there with a hammer and chisel over hundreds of years. Yet they are all formed by natural process.
And there lies the fascination of the Giant's Causeway. How could such streamlined structures occur naturally?
The Giant's Causeway for me is so special because it tells us a story. It tells us a story about the history of where we live.
The history of the Giant's Causeway reveals a time when this part of our planet was erupting with violent volcanoes that would eventually mold the surface of the Earth into a shape it takes today.
The Giant's Causeway represents a fascinating period of Northern Ireland's geological history, really. Also, it's a spectacular place to visit with some really remarkable rocks, which a lot of people are going to think, well, how the heck did they form?
The mesmerizing perfect columns have beguiled visitors for millennia. Scientists, however, soon found clues to how these perfect structures formed by looking at the type of rock found here. The most prominent is rock created out of volcanic lava flows and is called basalt. It is this that forms the majestic columns.
The Giant's Causeway itself is made up of around about 40,000 basalt columns, which are really vertical columns of a dark black rock that has anywhere between 5 and 7 sides, so it looks like it's a huge big rock jigsaw all fitted together.
While the lasting basalt is like a volcanic eruption's calling card left on the Earth, the presence of red and black layers in the rock point to the timing of different bursts of volcanic action.
You see two main periods of volcanic activity at the Giant's Causeway. If you look across to the east, you'll see there's a headland there, and it's got this red band sort of about halfway up. Below that, you see kind of rather dark layers. And so those were being erupted fairly frequent. But then there was a long period, a long pause, when there was no volcanic activity in that part of Ireland.
Many minerals are found in basalt, and among them is iron. Over time, the iron embedded in the basalt became exposed through years of weathering, gradually changing the black rock to the rusty color we see today.
As they weather, rain and such like, a lot of those iron minerals essentially go rusty, and that's what's created that red band. It's full of iron oxide.
The red band indicates an earlier lava flow. Following this, volcanic activity appears to have paused for about 200,000 years. But it would be a surge of eruptions that resumed, that would ultimately form into the majestic columns we see today. These were born out of an unrivaled period of volcanic activity, where extraordinary amounts of lava gushed up through the landscape. Scientists estimate that more than 4,000 square kilometers of lava, enough to cover the island of Hong Kong 4 times over, flooded the region within 1 million years.
There's much greater volcanic activity. They're what's called flood basalts, where you get huge amounts of lava actually pouring out in a relatively short amount of time.
Thick flows of lava, as high as a 30-story building, poured into the vast hollow in the landscape. It's this gigantic pool of lava that gives the majestic columns of the Giant Causeway their awe-inspiring height. As impressive as the columns are the perfect geometric shapes these structures take.
As you get down towards the causeway itself, you'll get your first glimpse of these regular columns, these hexagons and polygons of different number of sides.
These mesmerizing shapes formed as the mountainous quantities of lava began to cool, solidify, and contract.
So you've got 100 meters of lava, molten lava just sitting there as almost like an enormous puddle and spreading out on either side.
As the 1200-degree lava cooled, it shrank and cracked. What has remained a mystery, though, is at what point the contracting lava began to split apart, forming the individual pillars we see standing to such orderly attention now. At what temperature these columns form was a question that puzzled volcanologists for years. It wasn't until Jan Lavallee and his team at the University of Liverpool finally cracked it that this huge mystery was explained.
I went to Giant Causeway in 2003, and at that point I did not know that I was going to research this. It was the first time I see this, and obviously it's very gripping, right, looking at that geometry. And I had a lot of questions. So I started asking him about how did they form, what temperature, and then he looked at me and said, well, we don't know. There's an awful lot we don't know about the columnar joint. Geologists studied them, trying to look at how the rocks are made. Mathematicians try to look at the geometry and how this whole puzzle fits together. But there's a lot of questions about the mechanical properties of these lava when they're cooling to form these rocks that we did not know.
Jan and his team set out to prove whether the lava was hot, warm, or cold when it fractured into individual columns. The discovery would not only answer age-old questions about how the columns formed, but could lead to a greater understanding of how magma behaves in and around volcanoes. Their challenge: how to recreate cooling lava.
I was curious to know, can we reproduce this? First, at what temperature did they form? That was important to me. If you don't know when it forms or what temperature it forms, then you can assume, does it happen in the magma at a really high temperature, 1200 degrees, or does it happen in the very cold rock at 200-300 degrees?
Recreating lava-like temperatures is no small feat. Like with anything that's never been done before, one of the biggest hurdles was finding the resources to bring this invention to life. Jan worked with a series of engineers over a number of years to design a machine that would be able to handle extreme pressures and temperatures.
From the moment we designed the machine, that I knew that I was ready to tackle the problem. So then we went to Iceland, and then this is when we started mapping all of these different deposits that tell us about each of these cooling events and cracking event taking place in the magma. We brought these rocks back in Liverpool to study them, to prepare them for these experiments.
Once the machine was built, the real work began. But it would take a very special type of furnace that could heat up a sample of volcanic rock to the point that it would mimic the fracturing behavior of the giant's Causeway columns.
We wanted to look at this fracturing at high temperature, and whenever you want to do something at high temperature, well, there's a furnace around and it's inside, and we all appreciate looking at our pizza in the oven, making sure it's ready. Well, it's the same thing with our experiments.
Having mastered a method to safely view the heated up volcanic rock, Jan's team was at last able to measure the rock's cracking point. The results revealed the rock split apart at temperatures between 840 and 890 degrees centigrade, suggesting that this was the same temperature the giant's Causeway would have formed. The discovery was a world first.
It went viral. We were very surprised that in the first 2 weeks already 71 or some articles had been written about it, and apparently up to 200 and some million views, which is good. It means that actually what we produce finally has an impact to people. The amount of questions we can address, finally, it's all there. It's just there to be undertaken.
As well as creating columns, another effect of the cooling contracting lava was the creation of the near-perfect hexagons.
It's difficult to imagine lava cooling, from 1200 degrees centigrade and sort of solidifying. But you can actually see something that's pretty similar if you get a muddy puddle that dries out. As the mud dries out, it shrinks slightly, and you'll see quite often it forms these little polygonal patterns. In the case of the Causeway lava, it was so thick, it forms these immensely tall, impressive columns.
Why do the columns form such perfect polygon shapes?
If you would imagine a material contracting, it would want to do it from all directions equally. So the ideal geometry, in fact, if it was something long, would be a cylinder. The problem is here, because we have a large magmatic body, each of these cylinders, they essentially are interacting with one another. So you can't have two cylinders next to each other, then it would be some hole in the middle. So the best geometry to actually fill in the gap is to a series of hexagons.
Although this phenomena created the giant's Causeway 60 million years ago, it's a process that is still occurring. In Iceland, the same processes that created the giant's Causeway are unfolding today.
If you want to have a look at perhaps what Northern Ireland would have looked like around about 60 million years ago, Iceland is the best place to see that.
It seems difficult to imagine that similar volcanic activity that is so prevalent throughout Iceland imprinted themselves so dramatically on the north of the Emerald Isle.
Iceland is where we were 60 million years ago, and Iceland is a great place to go. You can actually see what was going on in Northern Ireland, in Iceland today. You can go there, you can see rocks that look just like the giant's Causeway.
The biggest learning really is that our planet does not stand still. Our Earth is constantly moving, constantly changing, and that's something that's going to happen for millions, if not billions of years to come.
An icon of Northern Ireland, this World Heritage Site has not only captivated geologists, myths of confronting giants, have endured to explain away this seemingly meticulous carved outcrop. And with so many giant features gracing the landscape, is it any wonder myths have evolved?
Giant's Causeway is quite a magical place.
The name the Giant's Causeway comes from an old legend that tells that the Giant's Causeway itself was built by a local giant called Finn McCool, and he was trying to build a causeway so he could fight his rival Scottish giant called Benandonner.
You'd be hard-pressed to find a local Northern Irishman who doesn't know the tale. Even the scientists who deal in fact know the way it goes.
There was a giant coming over from Scotland to meet up with him, you see. And this giant from Scotland, I think, was a bit bigger, you see. So Finn McCool was a bit worried.
The idea was that they were going to fight to prove who was the best giant. But whenever Finn McCool got sight of Benandonner, he realised that he was much bigger than him. So he actually ran back to his house, and his wife actually hid him in a baby's crib. So whenever Benandonner actually got to Finn McCool's house, he looked in the crib, he saw what he thought was the baby.
Oh my goodness, this is just a baby. How big's the real giant going to be?
If this is the size of the baby, what size is the giant? And he apparently ran back to Scotland, tearing up the rest of the causeway as he went. So I think it's a lovely story because really it harks back to the days whenever people didn't understand geology, they didn't understand the science behind how the rocks formed.
So popular is the legend of Finn McCool that many other stories have sprung up around key natural features. The giant eyes are one of the most famous earmarks here. The range of colors stem from the chemical makeup of the rock and a special type of weathering.
When it weathers, it takes on a characteristic feature known as spheroidal weathering or onion skin weathering. And it's called that for a reason, in that the layers peel off like the layers of an onion. And as they peel off, they actually start to look like eyes, and that's where the giant's eye names come from.
And this boulder can be explained as the fossilized boot of Finn McCool.
The giant's boot is another feature you might see on the coast, and it's another boulder of basalt.
The rock's remarkable shape has evolved due to erosion from the waves and elements that have sculpted it into this magnificent stone boot. The moniker of the giant organ explains the features on this cliff.
It's just in reference to the columns themselves, these lovely basalt columns along one of the cliff paths, and as you approach them, they actually look like a giant organ that a giant might have actually at one point played.
The giant, it seems, might also have played the harp. That has been the name given to these series of columns that were born out of lava cooling on irregular ground.
I like legends because they really are a way of trying to explain the landscape before science came along. So I think they have a really good place in putting geology together with folklore, because really it tells a little bit of our history as well. But of course, the real reason is more exciting. Volcanoes are infinitely more exciting than a giant, in my opinion anyway.
Welcome to one of the strangest places on Earth. This is the Brea Tar Pits, a series of nearly 100 oily quarries made of a substance so sticky it has ensnared some of the largest animals ever to have walked the Earth. From within these syrupy pools, the world's greatest collection of Ice Age fossils has emerged.
We have over 600 species of plants and animals preserved here. So it's one of the only places on Earth where you can really get a true snapshot of an entire ecosystem looking into the past.
Emily Lindsay is a paleontologist who carries out investigations into what life on Earth was like thousands of years ago. Most fossil hunters like her have to travel to the ends of the Earth to discover prehistoric treasures. Yet these syrupy pools, which store the remains of long-extinct prehistoric creatures, are situated in the heart of one of the largest cities in the world. just a few miles away from Hollywood Boulevard.
I think something that also feels a little bit impossible about it is that unlike pretty much any other major paleontological site on the planet, this one's in the middle of an incredibly populous city. The same asphalt seeps that trapped mammoths and are still trapping plants and insects and birds today share the park with people walking their dogs on their way to work. And there was a boot camp exercising outside the museum this morning.
Anyone can stop by to watch the work or visit the museum, home to all manner of tar pit treasure retrieved from the ground.
It is extremely sticky. Any unfortunate mouse or lizard that were to wander onto the asphalt seep would get stuck and eventually preserved by the asphalt. Giant ground sloth or a mammoth or a horse or a saber-toothed cat that were to walk too far into an asphalt seep would also end up getting trapped.
The black goo emanating from these tar pits is asphalt, also known as bitumen. It's the same substance used today for laying down roads, parking lots, sidewalks, and waterproofing rooftops. They are born from an oil field that lies deep below Los Angeles and are a product of a rare series of events. A process that began millions of years before, when Los Angeles was part of the ocean, and microscopic algae flourished in it.
The oil that forms the asphalt that is responsible for the incredible accumulations of fossils that we have at this site is actually formed from the bodies of trillions of dead single-celled algae called diatoms that were living in the oceans, filling the incipient Los Angeles basin 15 million years ago.
Normally, oil is naturally sealed under great pressure deep below ground. But Los Angeles sits alongside the San Andreas fault line, an area active with earthquakes. Tectonic movements create deep cracks below ground, creating a pathway for oil to escape up to the surface. At La Brea, a lighter surface oil evaporates, leaving behind the thick black goop. People have been making use of the La Brea asphalt for centuries. Native Americans recognized its usefulness as a sealant and a glue, using it for waterproofing canoes, as well as gluing together weapons, jewelry, and baskets. By the 19th century, Europeans had moved in. To farmers, the area represented decent grazing land for sheep. For geologists, the tar pits indicated a valuable oil field below. For paleontologists, La Brea became the ultimate fossil jackpot.
Today, 15 million years later, we have these same zombie diatoms coming back to the surface and trapping living things today and preserving them for the future.
It's these zombie diatoms that belch methane into the bubbles that form on the surface. Yet these winking black tar pits are something of a paradox. While representing a slow death trap for any unfortunate creature that strayed into them, these same gloopy pits immortalize their remains. It's as if Mother Nature has created a place to perfectly stockpile creatures from the Ice Age. The first pit excavation happened in 1913 and produced an incredible 1 million fossils. Some of the fossils from pits 3 and 4 are 35,000 years old. At other sites, remnants of the earliest pits are still being explored today, including the massive Pit 91. This is the largest and longest excavated tar pit at La Brea. It sits about 15 feet into the ground.
When we excavate, we either sit or lie on boards that are suspended above the actual deposit, because that is still in contact with an active asphalt seep, and so you couldn't go in there without getting stuck. So it's sort of somewhat uncomfortable and laborious way to excavate, but it's really the only way to get the fossils out without becoming one yourself.
More than 100 years after the first pit was excavated, work began on a new quarry called Project 23. This pit was salvaged when a nearby construction project came across it.
They dug down and they built a box around the entire tar pit and then lifted it up out of the ground and brought it over to our site here, where we're excavating it just in the same way that we would a deposit that was still in the ground.
The team had been working on this site for 361 days a year for the past 12 years. 2 to 5 people work on a box.
So it's about 1 meter in diameter, but it was about 2 meters when we started. We have a beautiful upper arm bone of a giant sloth here, a whole bunch of ribs here that are mostly giant sloth, but we also have some horses and bison. And then we have a lot of littler things, these little narrow things. Some of them are sticks of plants, and some of them are bird bones.
The wonder of the Brea Tar Pits is the sheer endless plethora of fossils they contain. Many of the fossils found are the superstars of the Ice Age.
Probably the majority of people who come to our site think that we have dinosaurs here. That's one of the biggest misconceptions, is telling people that these are mammals, they lived many, many millions of years after the large dinosaurs went extinct. We found over 5,000 direwolves at the tar pits. We found over 2,500 saber-toothed cats. We have American lions, which are some of the biggest cats that ever lived.
What drew all these animals to the tar pits all those years ago? Some of the dark, syrupy masses resemble a tempting waterhole. Thirsty animals approached these deceptive pools and soon became ensnared in the unrelenting gloopy substance. Some of the pits are deep. Pit 9, for example, reaches down 35 feet, making it deep enough to engulf anything from an American lion to a Colombian mammoth. So far, more than 30 of these giants have been unearthed from Pit 9. Curiously, more predators have been unearthed from these pits than any other larger animal. It's a reversal of the natural food chain, where carnivores at the top are outnumbered by grazing herbivores lower down.
We have about 9 large carnivores for every single large herbivore that we find here. And we think that the reason for this is that an herbivore, say a bison, would wander into an asphalt seep and end up getting stuck. And then that animal would attract a really large number of carnivores.
Many of the animals stuck in the asphalt ultimately perished from thirst and starvation.
Now, there's this misconception that tar pits are like quicksand and things would wander in and they would just sink down below the surface and drown, and that's not actually how they operated. The asphalt that's exposed at the surface is really only a few inches thick, but it is so sticky that those few inches are enough to trap something as large as a mammoth.
Finding a single fossil anywhere is remarkable. But the abundance and range of fossils found at the Brea Tar Pits is unprecedented. Normally, dead plants and animals decompose and disappear, as insects and bacteria nibble away at the carcass. But the remains of the animals that were slowly engulfed in these thick, sticky pools of asphalt became sealed, effectively weatherproofed against the elements. The result is a collection of Ice Age fossils that is incomparable in the world.
Well, as you can see, we have a huge number of fossils here, and it's a good way to demonstrate the incredible size of this collection. This is the most important and the largest Ice Age fossil site anywhere on Earth.
To date, the collection consists of more than 4 million individual pieces. But the task of creating this unrivaled catalog is as gargantuan as the Ice Age animals that roamed this area. For the diggers, every fossil from the tar pit, no matter its size, is a precious piece of evidence that can tell us about our prehistoric past.
We actually use dental picks, the same thing that, if you went to the dentist, they would use to clean your teeth with. We use these to clean our fossils. And that's part of why it's taken so long to get through this.
Obtaining these nuggets of knowledge from the depths of the tar pits is a meticulous process. Having been unearthed, the bones are stabilized with glue before being moved from the excavation site to the laboratory.
So this is one really cool piece that we have waiting to be prepared. This is the claw of a saber-toothed cat, and you can see, just like claws on modern house cats today, it's retractable.
Scientists consider what the tar pits collect to be so precious, they carefully remove and collect the remaining asphalt still on the bones.
Everything that comes off of those bones is saved and then is strained through a sieve, because even that dirt that's just stuck to the bones might contain up to hundreds of microfossils in it. And so then that goes over to our microscopes, where other researchers can look through and start to identify those fossils.
In the lab, the ultimate exercise in looking for the proverbial needle in the haystack gets underway. It is here where every single grain of sediment goes under the microscope and valuable microfossils are identified.
So this is actually where some of the most important science is happening at the Brea Tar Pits, because the vast majority of our more than 600 species of plants and animals that we've found are going to be coming out in this material. So all of that dirt that we collected from around the bones in the excavation site, and all of the dirt that came off of the bones that the paleontologists are cleaning over in the solvent area, gets washed and then strained, so that what we end up with is what we call matrix.
The matrix produced at La Brea contain tiny microfossils that read like the ingredients of a wizard's spell book.
This is actually a lower jaw of a rodent. This little tiny bone right here is actually part of a snake jaw. And I'm also pulling out lots of different plant fragments, as well of wood, leaves, and seeds, trying to figure out what types of plant species that we find here.
Giant mammoths are perhaps the most famous of the now extinct animals from the Ice Age. So the discovery of Zed created quite a sensation.
So this is Zed. He was one of the deposits in the Project 23 discovery, and he's a mammoth. So this is Zed's skull. This is his top teeth, and these are where his tusks would have come out. So his skull's sort of upside down on the ground. That's his lower jaw over there.
Zed is the most complete mammal so far to be unearthed from the La Brea Tar Pits. At first, the discovery of Zed was inconceivable. When excavators unearth fossils at the tar pits, usually only a few parts of any given animal are preserved. They are usually found far apart from each other and grouped in amongst other animal bones that lived thousands of years apart. Evidence of so many species give researchers priceless fragments of evidence into what California and even the whole world was like 50,000 years ago.
Los Angeles looked a lot different before any humans arrived and started hunting animals and interacting with the ecosystems. So it was a very, very highly biodiverse area.
Unlocking the secrets of La Brea Tar Pits fossils paints an incredible portrait of life on our planet during the Ice Age, as well as showcasing the rich biodiversity that lived in the area. The fossils found in the La Brea asphalt provide a snapshot of how the natural world responded to the last change in climate temperature.
One of the things that makes the tar pit such a phenomenal place for scientists is that it covers a really crucially important point in Earth's history, which is the last 50,000 years. So during that time period, Earth experienced the last major episode of global warming. It was the time period when humans first arrived on the American continents and started spreading out and interacting with ecosystems here. And it was also the time period when about 3/4 of the large mammals in the Americas went extinct. And so for scientists today who are trying to understand how modern ecosystems are going to respond to modern climate change or to increasing human populations or to the loss of important species, this is one of the best places to look and understand the long-term impacts of those changes. You have this incredible intersection of this rich scientific representation of the past and this modern cultural landscape right on top of it.
The Brea Tar Pits are not just a phenomenal place for scientists. They are a phenomenal place for the whole world. A place where an impossible variety of creatures, great and small, have been seemingly reborn from the guts of the earth, helping us understand what our own future may hold through the lessons it's given us about our past. You have arrived at what is surely the world's ultimate meeting place. This is Thingvellir. Situated in the west of Iceland, Thingvellir has drawn people together for over 1,000 years. In the year 970, early Viking settlers selected Thingvellir as the location of what would become one of the longest surviving parliaments in the world. With its natural solemn grandeur, few sites could have been more appropriate for the creation of laws. For 800 years, Icelanders have assembled here against this colossal backdrop, showcasing the Earth's natural forces at work. While Iceland's parliament has since moved to the capital Reykjavik, less than 25 miles away, citizens and visitors alike continue to assemble here. For Thingvellir is a meeting place like no other. It is one of the few places on Earth where the meeting of two tectonic plates is visible.
Look around. The faults here and the forces of nature are almost impossible. How can this landscape have been formed?
Thingvellir straddles two of the Earth's 7 tectonic plate boundaries. A few kilometers under the ocean floor, the North American and the Eurasian plates are slowly moving apart, creating a vast crack in their wake. The stretching of these two mighty plates is a phenomenon so rare, there are only 2 places on Earth where it can be seen above sea level.
We are at the Thingvellir National Park, and we are here standing on a plate boundary. The surface of the Earth is a mosaic of plates, and they are moving around. And here we see the expression of plates pulling apart. The plates are diverging, and therefore this big crack we are standing in.
As the plates pull apart beneath the ocean floor, above ground the land appears to stretch, creating a depression or rift valley.
In the process of the tectonic plates moving, Iceland actually is splitting apart. It's being kind of ripped in two.
As alarming as this sounds, the speed at which Iceland is physically splitting apart is slow, about 2 centimeters a year.
About as fast as your fingernails grow. That's the sort of spreading rate.
If the tectonic plates underneath Iceland continue to pull apart, is there a risk that Iceland will be broken in two? Not according to Freystein Sigmundsson at the University of Iceland. This is owing to the active volcanic magma that gave birth to Iceland around 16 million years ago and continues to shape her today.
There will be eruptions that come up and fill the gap. So I expect we will always have one Iceland because the new magma, new material from depth will come and fill it up. So maybe one day, some tens of thousands of years into the future, this area may be completely different. We may have eruptions, these fractures may fill, and the ground may become even again.
Today, scientists have a number of methods of measuring the rate these two plates are pulling apart, from down-to-earth techniques to methods that operate out of this world.
We are finding better methods to measure this plate spreading, these slow movements of the Earth. At about the speed your fingernails are growing, we can have special techniques to measure this. And nowadays we are using more and more satellites.
Another spectacular view of the plates is underwater. Silfra is considered among the top dive sites in the world, being the only place you can swim directly in the crack between two tectonic plates. An underwater view of the spectacular fissure is a drawcard for many. But the fissure of Silfra serenely boasts its own impossible feat: the presence of what many consider the clearest, purest water in the world. When diving, one of the first things you do is take a sip. It is likely the most pristine you'll ever taste. The presence of Silfra's water has undergone an extraordinary passage of its own. 12,000 years ago, glacier melt collected into a body of water. Following a volcanic eruption, it became sealed under a massive thick layer of lava. Over time, this seal of volcanic rock has served as a natural and highly effective filter. In fact, it is so thorough, the water filling the fissure of Silfra has taken decades to move through it. The result is water with visibility over 100 meters and exceptional purity. The ease of viewing these magnificent tectonic plate boundaries here is a feature few places in the world can claim.
That's great for geologists because it's like instead of buying a submarine and going down into the dark, you can actually stand on land and kind of see what a mid-ocean ridge kind of looks like.
Most plate boundaries occur 3 kilometers below sea level, with only 2 exceptions.
In 2 locations, here in Iceland and actually in a part of Africa, this mid-oceanic rift system comes on land because of excessive mantle upwelling, hot material that is going towards the Earth.
Our planet is made up of several layers, the thickest of these being the Earth's hot rocky mantle. When this rocky mantle becomes excessively hot, it can well up close to the Earth's surface, creating what experts call a mantle plume.
Iceland is very special. We have a combination of this spreading plate boundary, but also a hot spot, a mantle plume of hot upwelling material. And this lifts up the mid-oceanic ridge above sea level.
The forces of nature at work in Iceland are inescapable. Their indelible signatures mark this continuously evolving landscape.
I think people should experience nature and the magic and force of nature. I think that is important for all of us to understand why it is important.